Mayor, I believe you have a proclamation and some remarks.
I do, and is Joyce Nelson with us today? Is she going to be speaking?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Very good. And I want to acknowledge that the Native community also holds this day as a very, very special day. Joyce?
I'm Joyce Nelson.
I would like to say a few nice things about you, if you don't mind. Joyce, could you stand up just one more time so people can see you, please? We'd like to recognize you. Joyce is a member of the Assiniboine Sioux tribe from Montana. In 1944, Mrs. Nelson moved to Vanport with her parents and siblings all the way from the Fort Peck Reservation in eastern Montana. Her parents relocated here to take advantage of the jobs that were available in the shipyards. She was 13 years old when Vanport flooded, 4 years after her family moved from their tribal homelands. She vividly recalls seeing her housing unit twirling in the strong floodwaters right behind her family's car as they escaped this tragedy. Mrs. Nelson kept a scrapbook, which she has with her. One of the items that she saved is her emergency report card that was issued to all Vanport children who were unable to return to their school to complete the school year. She graduated from Lincoln High School when it was located in what is now Portland State University. She then went on to receive secretarial training at the Bureau of Indian Affairs Trade School in Lawrence, Kansas, called the Haskell Institute. Today, Joyce, we'd also like to recognize you and to acknowledge the significant Native American presence that thrived in Vanport before its collapse. Many of those families stayed on here in Portland to work and raise families. We'd like to recognize that Vanport was a contributing factor to the tribal diversity that is represented here in our city.
Actual film now because it's my debut.
Smile.
My mother was always cooking. It seemed like she was always cleaning and always cooking, and she was always there when we came home from school, always up with us. You know, we had a very small house. It had one room which was used for everything. It was a living room, it was a bedroom, it was a dining room, it was everything. And then we had a kitchen, very small kitchen. And of course the bathrooms were outside. We had outhouses. There was no refrigeration. My mother always had an apple box in the window, and that was for milk and butter, things that she needed to have refrigerated.
Kids have too much stuff. What do you mean?
We were sitting at the side of the house, me and Harold.
Where at?
In Poplar. And here we could see the gas station. We were next to this old gas station. And at the end of the day, he used to give Harold, you know, the old popcorn. He'd put it in a sack and take it to Harold. And here, bubblegum was, you couldn't get it because it was during the war. It was rationed just like everything else. And it was a penny a piece. And anyway, I sent Harold over there because it came in, and I sent him over there to steal me a piece. Dad came back, and here I was sitting on the side of the house, and I had this great big bubble. And he said, Joyce, and here that old bubble popped in my face. I knew I was in for it. And he said, where'd you get that bubble gum? And I looked at Harold, and I said, from Harold. And he said, Harold, where'd you get the money? And he said, I took it for her. So Dad, we had a little tree. Dad went over to that little tree, and he took his knife out, and he cut off a limb. And he said, Joyce, come here. And I started to cry before he even hit me. I was running around in circles and he was chasing. I remember he got a old Ford, Model T Ford, and he got a new tire and he had it sitting on the house on the and here Harold, I stuck Harold in that tire and I was pushing him down. And here Dad come around the corner and he saw me and I saw him and I let that tire go. Harold, that tire was going. He finally fell out. But when we came from Poplar, we went to Tacoma and we lived in Berry apartments where berry pickers lived. They had one great big row and all these people from Poplar lived there. All Indians.
So whatever made you move to Portland?
The work, the shipyard.
You have no job in Tacoma?
Well, they did, but it wasn't like the shipyards. And then they had Vanport City where you could get housing. But then they were hiring at Swan Island, and Mom and Dad both got jobs there. Vanport had everything. It had stores, theater, clinics, everything. They called it a city. It was Vanport City. It was a city within a city. They brought the Japanese people there after they let them out of the camps. So I had a real good friend, Okazaki, and she was in that camp in Idaho. And they lived in Portland. And when they came back to Portland, somebody had taken their house, all their land. They had nothing, nothing. And so she was my good friend. My mother and dad had gotten a piece of paper, and they thought the dike would break. They didn't know when, but if it did, it would be like no more than a foot of water. And so they had told everybody if it did break, you didn't have to take anything, just to put everything up, so it wouldn't get waterlogged. See, Joe's story is different from me and Harold because she was at the dike, her and Mom, when it broke. We were in the show.
The
And
movie.
here the manager went up on the stage, they turned the lights off and they said, go home as soon as you can. The dike broke. We didn't know what the dike was. We didn't get to spend our dime, so we stopped at this little store and that guy was throwing all his candy and stuff in the pickup and we were trying to buy something. He said, go home. He said, get home as fast as you can. And so we didn't get to spend our dime. Here we were running, and here Joe was coming up to meet us. Mom sent her up to the theater. I didn't even play the clarinet. I picked up Joe's clarinet. The only thing I took out of that house was a clarinet. It didn't even belong to me. And there was 3 families that was in that pickup, and it was a little pickup. There was all the Murs, all the Steels, and us. We all had big families. And I remember we were going up the hill to get out, and that water was right there by us. And we looked, and here it was turning those great big units like they were little cardboard boxes. But the one thing I remember is everybody from Portland was coming. They wanted to see the flood. And so they were more of a nuisance than those trying to get out. You could go over afterwards if you could find your apartment, because MERS found theirs and they got to salvage some stuff, but ours was completely demolished. Was nothing there. 2 years ago I called the Oregonian because this girl wrote, and she was 5 years old, And she remembered living in Vanport when she would hear guns going off, people quarreling. There was rats, mice, everything. Oh, I called up and I said, I don't know where in the hell she lived, but it sure wasn't in Vanport. You never saw no mice, no rats, no quarreling or gunshots or nothing. But it was segregated. You know, the blacks had their own section. Because we had a friend that Myrna and I, little black girl, we used to go over and see her, and their section was called Cottonwood. We'd go visit her. Here, anyway, I talked to that girl and I told her, I said, I don't know why you wrote stories like that. I said, that you didn't live in Vanport, you lived someplace else. And so I called the her supervisor. And I told him, I said, you know, she better retract that story because I lived in Vanport. And that wasn't Vanport. She was 5 years old. She's talking about some other place. And he said, well, I said, I hung up on her. And he said, oh, I heard about that. They never did retract it.
And you threw away
I know, but
you don't give her back the car. That's your way. What are you doing?
Oh, my.
I
can't do that.
Can you do that?
I have to try.
Well,
you can't.
Mom,
You what am I doing?
No.
Did you draw? Did you draw?
You can't do that.
Well, she didn't draw,
She
remember?
threw this away.
But
Yeah,
no,
but
she
So
she picked up
She
that
picked
one.
this up.
She made a mistake.
No, keep that.
And they took us straight to a First Baptist church on 11th downtown. And they made little petitions for us, and families were in those petitions. The second day I was there, this white woman came and she took 3 of us Indian girls, me, Teresa, and Tiny, to her house. They owned a nursery. They were rich. They had this nursery. And anyway, they took us to their place to stay. I don't know how come.
Made slaves out of you.
Yeah, I don't know. No, it's the first time we ever saw a vacuum cleaner. I mean, she said, girls, you can vacuum. We didn't know what to do with it. 13, never saw a vacuum. And then they told us to put the tumblers on the table. We didn't know what tumblers were. We just threw everything on the table. Turned out to be glasses. They had double beds, and those sheets were white, or everything was white on that bed. And so we wouldn't sleep in it. We laid on top because we didn't want to dirty it. Their names were Bulk, Mr. and Mrs. Bulk. Walter Bulk, I always remembered that. For years after, they'd send us Christmas cards and I'd write to them. And one day I never got anything, so I guess they died because they were old then. But we didn't go back to Mom until they moved Mom from that church to Swan Island, the barracks.
Where'd they put your mom and dad at? No.
They were in that church. And when we moved to Swan Island, then Gloria was born in Swan Island. On Sundays, we used to go sit in their church. They had a church outside. And they'd say, all you that want to be saved, come forward. And I always went up and Joe would be trying to grab me. I'm going to tell Mom on you. I'd go up anyway. I was saved every Sunday. And they had ball fields. We played ball there. Then they sent us to Giles Lake and they put us in trailers, and we had 2 trailers because we were a big family. The reason I went to Lincoln is because I was in Giles Lake when I was a freshman. And then Mom and Dad got a house on Southwest Columbia, and that was right next to Lincoln High School. So I graduated from Lincoln, and all the others graduated from Roosevelt, except for Harold graduated from Central Catholic.
There used to be a restaurant called Jolly Jones, and we used to go run to Jolly Jones to get a hamburger. And I always remember we took my friend Laura Walker, and she was a black girl. And we went into Jolly Jones with her, first time she had ever been with us. And we waited, and we waited. And we didn't have much time because it was lunch. And they wouldn't serve us, but they were serving all around us. And there was a girl there, Rose Hanson, and she said, "Are you ever going to take our order?" And she said, "No, I can't." And mind you, this was 1951, I believe it was. Could never believe that of Jolly Jones. After that, we never went to Jolly Jones.
Oh, Lonnie, don't be following me around. Here's your candy. My folks, I didn't even know I was going to Haskell. Mom said, "Oh, we got to get Joyce to the train." They took me to the train depot. Mom and Dad put me on the train, and the way I went, I never knew a soul at Haskell. I said, and from there I went to Belcourt, I went to Kansas City, I worked in Missouri and Kansas, went to Montana, Denver. I must have went to Denver. That's where I met Mr. Wright.
And I had a friend that I went to Haskell with, and her name was Mary Garcia. Anyway, she had moved to Denver with another friend of mine that went, all 3 of us went to Haskell, and they wanted me to come over there. And so I did. I went to Denver. And the day I arrived was the day that he was discharged from the Marines. So everybody was going out to, I can't remember the name of the place, but it was a dance hall, and I used to love to dance. And so we all went. Well, for some reason, I got paired up with him. That was 45 years ago. I'm still with him. And the kids said, "What did you do? Where did you go for a honeymoon?" Well, we went to a little soda place and had a milkshake. That was the end of our money. Well, right after that, we moved to Louisiana. And he worked on the oil rigs. And then it was really lonesome over there because it was mainly French people, and they talked French. And so one day I packed up all my stuff and I left. And I left him because I had told him, it was so lonesome, and we lived in the bayou. I lived in a little house, and it was right in the swamp, right in the middle of the swamp. And then right on the other side was the bayou. And if you can't visit with anybody, I had a dog that just happened to come to our house, and so it was I and this dog that went around because Fuzzy worked all the time. And so I just left, and I went back to Denver. Well, I think he came home, and he must have left because he almost beat me back to Denver. But then we lived in Denver, and I had my daughter, the oldest one, she's 44 now, Valerie. I had her in Denver. And so I had my second one, Sam. He's 42. No, he's 43. And I had him here in Portland. And then Buzzy came up here and he got a job. And we got a house. And then I had my third one, John. And John died in 1969. So I don't know. John would be 40, 42. Those kids were all close. And then we moved back to Denver. And I had, we called her Poker Ann, but it was Joanne. And Joanne, she died when she was 25. And then we moved back here, and I had Angie in 1967. Angie died when she was 23. So we raised Angie's son. When she died, he was 2. And so we've had him since he was 2 years old. And actually, he's just like ours.
What is his name?
John. And he was named after Buzzy's grandpa, who was John Y. Nelson.
PAIC, but that started in the 50s.
Oh.
That was back in the 50s. All Sioux. And then they had these kids that came from Colville that were college kids. Joe Delacruz was one of them. Dorothy. And they were all involved in the Portland American Indian Center. And then Portland American Indian Center had started one. And they called it the White Buffalo. And here that James Smith got mad. He said, that's a family name. He said he wanted it back. So we called it Portland American Indian Center. Now, all those people left. And Harold, the reason they did was it was political. Harold got president. And they wanted Carl McLean. And then Joe was secretary. Most of them wanted to meet Indians, and there was no place to meet Indians here except Skid Row. So they had that. They had a calendar where they had events. And right here at this Oddfellows Hall, right here on Lombard, we used to have our dances. Then we had basket socials and Christmas programs, and it was really a good organization.
Had a bowling team, everything.
Yeah, we had a bowling team
Had a bowling league. It was a lot of fun.
every Sunday. Mom didn't bowl, but Dad did. He was on a team.
Me and you and Harry and Norman was on a team.
Yeah, uh-huh. There's a picture of that. No, we had other powers. Our first one was at Lloyd Center. When they opened up Lloyd Center, we did a powwow for Lloyd Center, their grand opening. That was in 1961.
And the next one was at Benson High School. And then
Mm-hmm. Seemed like they gave us $700 to perform. Dad was on a drum group, him and Charlie Ackerman. We had a sewing club. We had Indian dances, white dances, bowling, basketball, picnics. Oh, in the summertime we had picnics galore. I was never really a member of Bow and Arrow, but I used to go over there because of the bakers and, the people that were there. So did Mom and them. Because Bow and Arrow started in 68, and about that time, 69, they were having meetings for NARA. He got involved in that, and so did I. I stopped when John died, and he died in 69. And I remember Bow and Arrow put on a dinner for us. You remember that, Buzzy?
Mm-hmm. Kinda.
Yeah, they got a hall and they put on a dinner, and all of us went, and the community went, and they had a drum there.
So we took the kids everywhere so that they knew our little boy, John, when he got killed. And the outpouring of the community was unbelievable. So people still remembered him. You know, a lot of the people that have been here for many years, because this was back in the 60s.
I was there temporary for 6 years because I couldn't be permanent because of Buzzy. They had a nepotism clause, and so they grandfathered me in. I could have stayed there forever. And I was on there and the UIC board.
That's
And
when they were gonna beat you up.
Yeah. And here, anyway, Celox called me and she said, Joyce, she said, they're out to get you. And I said, who's out to get me? And she said, it was this, a couple of them. And I said, well, they know where I live. And so she just said, well, watch it.
NARA, Sydney put her on.
It was
From the
it was
representative from
representative from different, and so I was the
organization. She was
representative from NARA.
NARA.
So I told Sid, I said, you know, Sydney, I said, I don't know. I said, they're getting really political and, you know, they're making stabs at. I don't know if you'd want to be part of this. You need to come to a board meeting. So her and Rufus came and they sat through that meeting. And when it was almost over, she got up and she said, I'm pulling our representatives from this board. We're not going to be affiliated with it. This isn't the way a board should be run. And so I got up and I left. I quit when Dad died and stayed home because I stayed with Mom. I mean, I didn't stay with her, but, you know, I'd go over and she'd come over. And GIC was started by Pa and mostly by Buzzy because he got mad at after a UIC meeting. Yeah, whoever came
In the
out of that meeting, Buzzy said,
They
to
were
go to our
threatening us.
house and we'd, you know, we'd start something. So we did. Anyway, we went and CIC went and put Arnold on the board at UIC. And here, Arnold would go to their meeting and they wouldn't be there. And he'd call and he'd say, Joyce, I'm at UIC and nobody's here. What they did is they changed meetings so Arnold couldn't get to a meeting.
So what we did is we put on an Easter egg hunt. And you know, for many, many years, I had an Easter egg hunt here in my yard when my kids were little. So all those years, my egg hunt was right here, you know, around my house. And so anyway, we had it over there, and all the Indian families came. And, you know, we had to laugh because the kids then, now they're bringing their kids. And so you look back on how many years this has been going. Same way with the basket, Thanksgiving. Now it's another generation.
AIAP was started from Concerned Indian Community, but they didn't want, CIC didn't want to be that kind of a program because we were too vocal. And they didn't want to have politics in it. And we were into politics. It was going really good. I mean, it was going to go someplace. But then they got there as board chairman was a controller. She wanted to control everything, everybody. So we stepped out, even though, you know, it came from CIC, we left. And then other ones left. They had a lot of goals that they were going to do. They wanted a community center. And Whoop Whoop gave us that land down there, that community center.
Oh.
I mean, always that was Portland American Indian Center's goal was to get a community center.
Now, the second unit was named after our family, which is called the Nelson Court. I think it's partially because of our involvement in the community, and then also my two daughters played sports, and they traveled to other Indian reservations, and my husband was a coach, and they played softball. Both of them were very talented. My daughter was 14 when Warm Springs used her as their starting pitcher. I think between their involvement and our involvement, and then I had the little boy, he was 8 when he died. But the community was so close way back then because we didn't have a lot of Indians living here. My generation, there's a lot of Indian elders. And so we started a new one, which is the Portland Indian Elders, we call it, and it's on Sundays. And anyway, it's more or less what I was thinking, where we would go and, visit. That's important, is keeping in contact with the elders. And then we eat, we play bingo. The guy that started this Portland Elders is from Belcourt. He's a Chippewa. And Patrick Lavender. So we're there on Sundays from 1 to 4. And it's really nice because NARA sends one of the nurses over whenever we request her. And they gave us our flu shot and our blood test. And the next one will be diabetes. So they come to us instead of us going to NARA. They come to the elders, and it works out really nice.
One thing, it's gotta be too long.
Ooh, that's nice.
Well, look how big they think I am.
Oh my God!
What is that? What size is that?
What size is that?
Oh!
Look in the net.
Pa, you and I can both get in there.
That's probably why they got it.
We had our ups and downs, and there was always somebody that helped us. And so when the time came, we're just repaying back. And when we're gone, somebody will take our place.